I dialed Daniel's number that morning, my heart light with the thought of his wedding. "Hey, sweetheart, when's the big day?" I asked, picturing myself in a soft blue dress, pinning a corsage on my only son. The line crackled, and then Claire's voice cut through, sharp and cool. "Oh, Marianne, we got married yesterday. It was just family, you know." My breath caught, like someone had pressed pause on my world. Just family. I stood, frozen in my kitchen, the phone trembling in my hand, coffee cooling on the counter. Her words echoed, slicing deeper each time. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. I beg your pardon," I whispered, trying to sound calm. Claire's tone softened, but it was the kind of softness that comes with condescension. "It was a small thing, nothing big. We didn't want to make a fuss." Then, as if the final blow wasn't enough, she added lightly, "Only close family were invited." The silence that followed felt endless. Close family. I stared at the phone, wondering what that made me. My fingers went numb, and I realized I hadn't even asked to speak to Daniel, my son, the boy I raised alone after his father passed, the boy I carried through fevers and heartbreak, who once promised he'd never forget me. I sat down slowly, as if the air itself had turned heavy. The clock ticked above the stove, a sound I'd never noticed before, mocking the stillness inside me. The refrigerator hummed, the morning light cut through the curtains, and yet everything around me felt wrong. Barred up, my mind raced through memories. Daniel's graduation, the nights I stayed up sewing his shirts for job interviews, the joy when he first brought Claire home and said, "Mom, she's the one." I'd believed him. I'd welcomed her like a daughter. Now, my heart stung with a strange mix of disbelief and shame. I wanted to call back, to demand an explanation, to ask why, but something inside me stopped that quiet, breaking part of a mother that realizes the distance has already been built. I walked to the window, watching the street where children rode bikes, mothers calling out after them. Life went on, uncaring. My reflection in the glass looked older somehow, smaller, a woman erased from her own story. I whispered into the silence, "Only family was invited." And for the first time in my life, those words didn't include me. That evening, I couldn't stop myself. I opened Facebook, hands trembling, and searched for Daniel's name. The screen filled with light, and there it was, a photo of them under an arch of white roses. Claire in her lace dress, Daniel beaming beside her. "My son, my only son." The caption read, "Forever begins now." And below it, dozens of comments. Congratulations, heart emojis, the warm words of strangers and friends. I scrolled, eyes stinging, until I saw her family, her parents, her brother, even her grandmother, all smiling in group photos, toasts, dances, laughter. The word small suddenly felt cruel. I leaned back in my chair, my heart thudding. The dress she wore, I recognized it. I'd gone with her to pick the fabric. I'd insisted on paying for half. "Your family now," I'd said. How naive those words sounded now. The lie beneath her smile was blinding. I saw it in every picture. Claire's perfect, practiced grin, Daniel's arm draped around her waist. Their world closed tightly around them, without me. I remembered how she once joked, "Your mom is so sweet, Daniel, but she worries too much." Maybe that was where it began, the slow turning of my love into a burden. A memory flashed. The months when Daniel lost his job, I'd covered his rent quietly, told him it was fine. I'd stocked their pantry when they couldn't afford groceries. I'd driven across town with homemade soup when Claire was sick. All those small, motherly things, invisible acts that stitched our family together. And now, this was my reward. To be erased, edited out of their happiness like an unwanted line in a photograph. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. There was a picture of the cake, a three-tiered masterpiece, and the caption from Claire's mother, "So proud of our children." I could almost hear the laughter, the clinking glasses, the speeches. My seat, the one where a mother should have been, was empty. A hot tear fell on my hand, surprising me. I wiped it quickly, ashamed of how much it hurt. "It's just a ceremony," I told myself. "Just a day." But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. It was a message, a declaration of who counted as family, and who didn't. I closed the laptop slowly, the screen dimming to black. My reflection stared back, weary, humiliated, heartbroken, but also something else. Beneath the ache, a question began to form, sharp and persistent. Why? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew I would find it. I wasn't keeping score, but the numbers didn't lie. I had bought their comfort, not their love, that morning. I pulled a notepad from the drawer, the same one I used for grocery lists and birthday reminders. I wrote at the top, Daniel and Claire support. The word looked innocent, but I knew it carried the weight of years. I started with the rent, $800 a month, for nearly a year. That alone was almost $10,000. Then came groceries, $200 here, $150 there, until the numbers began to blur. Furniture, the sofa they said was temporary, the kitchen set, the down payment on their car, birthdays, vacations, wedding gifts. Before there was even a wedding, $30,000, maybe more. The pen trembled in my hand. I sat back and looked at the list. Each line wasn't just money. It was a memory, a visit, a phone call, a moment when I thought I was needed. Every dollar had felt like love at the time, like proof I was still part of Daniel's life. But now, under the cold light of morning, those numbers looked like something else entirely, a receipt for my own erasure. I remembered the first time Daniel asked for help, just until I find a new job, Mom. His voice had been so tired, so ashamed. I didn't even think twice. Mothers don't. I dipped into my savings without hesitation, but the requests never stopped. They simply changed shape. Claire's hours got cut. The car needs repairs. We'll pay you back when things settle. Things never settled. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to calm the dull ache building behind my eyes. My friends had warned me, gently, over tea and sympathy. You're too generous, Marianne. They'll take advantage. I smiled, defensive. They're just finding their way. But now I could see it not as cruelty, but complacency. They'd learned that love from me always came with a check. I'd taught them that comfort was constant, no matter how they treated me. I looked around the kitchen, the faded curtains, the chipped mug I always used, the quiet. My own life had been shrinking while theirs expanded. They'd built something new, without me, on the foundation I paid for. Tears came, but they weren't bitter. They were clean, steady, freeing, because somewhere between the numbers, I found something I hadn't felt in years, boundaries. I tore the last page from the pad and folded it carefully, not as a reminder of loss, but as evidence of who I'd been. A mother who gave everything. Now, I was ready to give differently, not with money, with distance. A week later, my phone rang again. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected to see so soon, Claire. For a moment, I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, that stubborn thread of motherhood, made me swipe the call. Marianne, she began softly. I hope you're okay. Her tone was too careful, too polished. I'm fine, I said, pouring tea into my chipped mug. How's married life? A pause, then a small sigh. We've been managing. But, actually, that's why I called. Daniel's hours got cut at work, and, well, we're short on rent this month. Her voice trembled when she said the rent was due. Mine didn't when I said only special people. Silence, the kind that hums through the line, where words fail and truth settles like dust. I don't understand, she stammered. I think you do, I said quietly. You once told me only family was invited. I suppose that means you'll have to rely on them now. There was a sharp intake of breath on her end, the sound of realization crashing through pride. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Marianne, please. Daniel didn't mean, but I interrupted gently. I'm sure he didn't. Still, actions speak clearer than words, don't they? I learned that lesson from your wedding photos. The silence stretched longer this time. I could hear faint voices in the background. Daniel's maybe asking who she was talking to. Tell him I said hello, I murmured, and tell him I finally started keeping score. Then, before she could respond, I ended the call. I sat for a long time, staring at my hands. They didn't shake this time. For years, those hands had written checks, cooked meals, cleaned up after Hope. Now they simply rested, steady, sure. Outside, the late afternoon sun slipped through the trees, catching dust in the air like tiny sparks. I thought about all the times I'd rushed to fix things, to smooth over every discomfort. That part of me, the part that couldn't bear to see Daniel struggle, was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Because love, I finally realized, isn't proven through sacrifice. It's proven through respect. And if they couldn't give that, they'd have to learn life's lessons without my safety net. For the first time in years, I made myself a cup of tea and let it steep properly. I didn't answer when the phone rang again. Let them figure it out. I'd already paid enough. It took 3 signatures to close their account and reopen my peace. I walked into the bank that morning, the sun glinting off the windows and catching dust motes in the lobby. I held my purse closer than usual. a mixture of determination and nerves warming my palms. Mr. Klein, my usual banker, looked up with a smile that held genuine concern, the kind I hadn't felt from Daniel in months. "Good morning, Marianne. How are you today?" he asked, eyebrows lifting in that kind, professional way. I smiled back, though the smile carried gravity. "I'm here to make some changes," I said, placing a neatly folded folder on the counter. "I need to cancel all automatic transfers to my son and his wife." The concern on Mr. Klein's face deepened. "Are you sure, Marianne? That's a significant change." I nodded. "I've thought about it. It's necessary." He hesitated, then leaned forward. "I understand. It's hard to put boundaries on family, but you have to take care of yourself first." That simple acknowledgement hit me harder than I expected. More understanding from a stranger than I'd received from my own child. I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of sorrow and liberation. We moved through the paperwork slowly, step by step. Every signature felt like lifting a weight off my chest, like reclaiming pieces of myself I had handed away over years of unquestioned generosity. The pens felt heavy in my fingers, as if they bore the past. I signed the first sheet. I signed the second. I signed the third. Each mark was a quiet declaration. I am done giving at the cost of my dignity. Mr. Klein handed me the final receipt. "All transfers are cancelled. You're in control now." I looked down at the paper, feeling the reality sink in. Control. For the first time in years, the word didn't feel abstract. It felt tangible, like sunlight warming my face after a long winter. I thanked Mr. Klein and stepped out of the bank, the city noises washing over me like a tide, carrying away the weight of 3 years of financial strain. On the sidewalk, I paused, inhaling deeply. The air smelled faintly of fresh bread from the bakery across the street, mixed with the crisp scent of autumn leaves. I felt lighter than I had in months, as if the act of closing the account had also closed the chapter on my fear, my anxiety, and my blind loyalty. I walked a few steps before realizing I was smiling, a genuine, unburdened smile that didn't hide worry or resentment. Freedom had a texture I hadn't anticipated, not loud or celebratory, just quiet, steady, and deeply mine. I used to walk these streets carrying groceries for them. Now I walk with nothing, and it feels lighter. The walk home felt different that afternoon. The neighborhood, familiar yet distant, greeted me like an old friend. I passed the corner where Daniel had learned to ride his bike, remembering his small hands gripping the handlebars, a mixture of fear and pride in his wide eyes. I remembered evenings spent making pasta together, his laughter filling the small kitchen. The years of innocence and love he had once carried before ambition, marriage, and expectation reshaped him, came back to me in fragments. Each step I took felt like a shedding of old skins. The betrayals still lingered, sharp at moments, but it no longer defined my walk. I breathed more deeply, noticing the soft rustle of leaves underfoot, the warm sun touching my shoulders, the distant call of a bird. Small, ordinary miracles that had gone unnoticed when my heart had been crowded with worry and resentment. I passed the house where I had once painted Daniel's nursery walls myself, humming lullabies I barely remembered. I slowed, letting my gaze linger. My grief wasn't just for the betrayal, it was for the child I had raised, the trust I had nurtured, the mother-son closeness that now existed only in memory. Yet, with each memory, a strange peace settled over me. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need explanations. I didn't need validation. My path was my own, and for the first time in years, I felt the world open before me. I paused at the corner, looking down the street, letting my eyes trace the familiar curves and cracks in the pavement. I could see neighbors I had waved to countless times. For a brief moment, I imagined walking with Daniel again, not as a mother who provides, but as a woman who stands beside her own choices, independent, steady, and unafraid. I kept walking. My purse was light, my step was measured. I felt my shoulders release tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The betrayal still existed. Yes, it would never vanish entirely, but it no longer dictated my actions or my self-worth. By the time I reached my front door, I had a sense of clarity I hadn't known for decades. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and leaned against it, taking in the familiar warmth of my home. The silence was comforting, a sanctuary. I had nothing to prove to anyone. I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the world move beyond my small garden. A bird hopped along the fence, pecking at fallen seeds. The day was ordinary, yet it felt extraordinary in its simplicity. I had survived betrayal, reclaimed my freedom, and discovered strength in myself that no one could take away. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, I realized something crucial. Life still held countless steps for me to take, and this time, I would walk them entirely on my own terms. The phone rang all morning, its sharp tones slicing through the calm of my home. Daniel, Claire, Daniel again, Claire again. Each call felt like a drumbeat of guilt and expectation, and yet, I didn't answer. I poured myself a cup of tea, the steam curling into the air like quiet defiance. My hands were steady, my heart calm, though every ring reminded me of years I had spent giving and forgiving without recognition. I remembered their faces from the wedding photos I had seen. Claire's smile, so practiced, so proud. Daniel's distracted grin, the way he avoided looking directly at me. And now, here they were, expecting me to jump, to explain, to beg, or worse, but I didn't. I allowed the silence to stretch, filling the space where their demands had always been. The first call, I let ring. The second, by the third, I could hear Claire's voice leaving a message, her tone trembling. Mom, please, I know you're upset. We didn't mean to hurt you. Can we talk? Her words, so familiar and yet so hollow, bounced off my resolve. I wiped my hands on the tea towel and looked out the window. The sky was a soft gray, the clouds drifting slowly across a muted autumn landscape. For the first time in years, I felt the world outside my home, as if it were mine alone. By the fourth call, Daniel's voice was on the answering machine, tight with urgency. Mom, it's just a misunderstanding. We need to sort this out. I don't want any more tension between us. I felt a flicker of something old, reflexive concern, but I pushed it down. No more running, no more excuses. This time, I would let them feel the weight of the silence they had imposed on me. The hours passed. I watered the plants on the balcony, noticing how the sun caught the edges of the leaves. I brewed another cup of tea, the aroma calming, grounding. Each ring that went unanswered was a reclaiming of space I hadn't realized I'd lost. Their urgency, their repeated attempts, only underscored how much I had been taken for granted. I walked to the window, looking at the quiet street below. Years of bending, of rushing to meet their needs, of placing their comfort above my own, had taught me to expect the worst from them. And yet, in this moment of deliberate inaction, I discovered something new. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers, it waits, and it allows you to breathe while the world knocks at your door. When evening came, the phone stopped ringing, finally silent. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the loud kind, not the fleeting kind, but a quiet, steady calm that belonged solely to me. For the first time, I realized that ignoring their calls wasn't cruelty. It was reclaiming dignity, drawing a line that no one could cross. The silence spoke louder than any argument, any explanation. And as I set the phone down, the faint echo of the morning's calls, still lingering in the air, I understood fully. This was my life, my rules, my calm, and if they wanted reconciliation, they would have to meet me on these terms, terms I had never dared to set before. The next day would bring a visit, but for now, the silence was mine, and it was louder than their words. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, sharp and insistent. I had been tending my small herb garden, the scent of rosemary filling the air, when I heard it. My heart tightened, not with fear, but with quiet determination. I knew who it would be. I set down the watering can and walked to the door, smoothing my cardigan. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, his hands half raised, as if in surrender. Claire hovered just behind him, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. Mom, Daniel began, his voice uneasy, we just want to talk. Please, don't be angry. He stepped forward, but I didn't move. My eyes met his, searching for the boy I had raised, the one who had once hugged me tightly when I cried. Instead, I saw the man who had hidden a wedding from me, who had treated my love as optional. I took a slow breath and said quietly, family includes the ones who remember you when no one is watching, Daniel. The ones who show up before there are cameras, before there are photos. That is family. My voice was soft, but every word carried weight. Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel faltered, as if he had expected anger, yelling, or tears, but not quiet, unwavering truth. We didn't mean to, Claire started, but I raised a hand, halting her words. I understand intention doesn't erase action. Claire, your just family wedding erased me. I was there in every way you needed, but invisible when it counted. My eyes scanned their faces, lingering on the frustration in Daniel and the forced politeness in Claire. They had rehearsed this confrontation, but it didn't matter. Their rehearsals could not touch my clarity. Daniel's throat worked, his hands fidgeting. "Mom, we thought you wouldn't want," I smiled faintly, not bitterly, but with calm resolve. I didn't need to want anything, Daniel. I deserved to know. I deserved respect. That is something no one can give without thought. I have learned that lesson, and now, so must you. The air was still. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. I could feel the tension pressing, the weight of all the unspoken words and old expectations. And then I did something they hadn't expected. I stepped back. I didn't slam the door. I simply closed it, slowly, deliberately. No rage, no apology, no argument. Just the finality of my choice. The soft click was louder than any shouting, heavier than any tear. Standing there, I leaned against the door, feeling a strange relief. My boundaries were no longer invisible. They were clear, unshakable. They would have to understand, or live with their absence. Daniel's footsteps retreated, Claire's voice, a low murmur, and the front steps were empty. I returned to my garden, the rosemary brushing against my hands as I resumed my morning work. The sky was pale and calm, and for the first time in a long while, my world felt entirely my own. I didn't need their permission, their explanations, or their presence. I had drawn the line, and in doing so, I had reclaimed myself. That night, as I poured a cup of tea and watched the sun dip below the horizon, I understood fully. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't require shouting or vindication. It requires knowing your worth and acting accordingly. I had spoken truth calmly, faced betrayal without surrender, and closed the door on what I could not change. Tomorrow, the world might call again, but today, my peace had been restored. And that, I realized, was victory enough. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing on my chest. I made coffee for one, savoring the steam curling into the morning light, tasting freedom in every sip. I wandered into my garden, my hands brushing the soft petals of newly bloomed flowers. Each movement felt deliberate, like reclaiming time I had lost worrying about rent, gifts, and endless obligations. I spent mornings visiting old friends, their laughter filling rooms and hearts in equal measure. We exchanged stories, reminisced, and I realized how much I had missed human connection that wasn't transactional. For years, I had been invisible to the ones who should have cherished me most, and now, the warmth of genuine friendship reminded me I was seen. I returned to simple pleasures, reading books I had abandoned, writing letters to friends whose names I hadn't spoken aloud in ages. I laughed freely, unself-conscious, at memories and small absurdities in daily life. Each sound, each smile, built layers of resilience I hadn't realized I was missing. The world no longer felt threatening. It felt open, expansive. Walking along the nearby park one afternoon, I watched families pass by, their children laughing, dogs chasing, lovers holding hands. I thought of Daniel and Claire, the secret wedding, the coldness that had once pierced my chest. Instead of anger, I felt a gentle release. They had taught me a lesson, but it was one I needed. My happiness could not be given or taken by anyone else. Back home, I redecorated my apartment with touches that reflected me: bright cushions, photographs of travels, small treasures I had collected over the years. My home became a sanctuary, a canvas of my independence. Every detail, every arrangement, whispered ownership of my life back to me. Evenings became quiet rituals of reflection. I sipped tea by the window, watching the city lights shimmer like tiny stars. I wrote in my journal, capturing thoughts and insights I had ignored in the rush of family duties. I had learned that peace was not passive. It required active choice, each small act watering the plants, calling a friend, cooking a proper meal was a declaration that I belonged to myself first. Sleep came easier now, the quiet night filled not with worry but with gratitude. I had navigated betrayal, reclaimed my boundaries, and discovered that solitude, when chosen, could be a gift rather than a punishment. I was whole, not because anyone had restored me, but because I had restored myself. For the first time in years, I whispered to no one, "I make coffee for one and it tastes like freedom." The words hung in the air, a mantra, a promise, and a reminder that I could thrive alone. I often find myself speaking to the empty room now, as if the walls are old friends. If your love is not respected, I say, step back, not to punish, but to protect your peace. This principle has become the core of my life, guiding decisions large and small. It is not vengeance that fills me, but wisdom earned through years of giving too much to the wrong people. I reflect on Daniel's betrayal, the wedding kept from me, the silent assumption that my love was a given. I do not wish harm upon them, yet I cannot deny the clarity that distance has brought. Respect, I realize, is earned in both directions. I cannot manufacture it for anyone who refuses to honor it. Gratitude has also grown within me. I am thankful for my friends, those quiet witnesses who saw my struggle and stood by my side. Their support reminded me that family is not only blood, it is loyalty, respect, and presence. And it is those relationships I now nurture. With care and intention, I have begun volunteering, sharing my time with organizations that protect the elderly from emotional and financial abuse. The lessons I learned in pain are now tools to help others navigate their own trials. Teaching and mentoring fills me with purpose, a sense that my experiences are not wasted but transformed into guidance for others. Financial independence, once a source of anxiety, has become a cornerstone of my dignity. Every decision about my money now reflects choice rather than obligation, autonomy rather than fear. I travel, paint, and invest in my health, all with the sense that my life belongs to me and not to anyone else's expectations. Writing letters to old friends, reconnecting with cousins, and joining small local groups has restored my social confidence. I am visible, valued, and active. The lessons of betrayal and resilience echo in every conversation, every laugh shared, every hand held in support. I am building a life where my voice matters, and my presence is honored. Sometimes I look at the stars from my balcony and remember the woman I was a year ago, manipulated, believing love could be bought. That version of me is gone. In her place stands a woman who knows true love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. I am whole, and I am safe in my own choices. As I close this chapter of my life, I speak to you, my viewers. Cherish yourself, guard your peace, offer love freely, but never at the expense of your dignity. We raise children to know love, yet sometimes we must teach them respect by walking away. It is not cruelty, it is wisdom. The sun sets, bathing the room in soft golden light. I sip my tea, breathe in deeply, and smile. I am 72, independent, and alive in every sense of the word. The trials I endured shaped me, but they did not break me. I have reclaimed my story, my home, my peace, and in that reclamation, I find the quiet joy that no betrayal can ever touch.